All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of the broadcast. This is Tuesday, August 29th, 2017. Back again here with you for another edition of the show. Tearing myself away from my continued work on Spellcasters Volume 2, the never ending. I'm at that never going to see the light at the end of the tunnel stage of the game, where it just feels like, oh, it's never going to end. You're never going to be done with this. But the end result will be well worth any of that. So I just have to soldier through it and keep going. And that's what I'm trying to do. There was so much. I got off the show last night. Just remember there was so many other things I didn't mention last night I wanted to mention. And now I can't seem to remember what those things were either, but I'll think of them, or I won't think of them. I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, I hate when I do that. When I mention something and forget to go back and mention other little things to go with it. But anyway, regardless of that, we've got quite a few news stories and anything. I don't really have any other topics of anything I really want to discuss with you here tonight, to be honest with you. The big thing, I guess, that I didn't discuss or talk about yesterday that I should talk about and discuss right off the top tonight is the everything, of course, that's going on here in my home state of Texas with the hurricane and the flooding and the rains and all this fucking apocalyptic madness. But as you could probably tell, since I was here yesterday, contrary to many people, I tell you, I've gotten a lot of emails from people. Makes me wonder if some of you have never seen a map before, just to be point blank about it. I appreciate the concern, but I mean, I live in Dallas, so, I've stated that many times. Texas is a gigantic fuck off style, mega size, super size fucking state. It's huge. So the worst things about trying to go anywhere on any trip, because so much of your time is spent just going across Texas, either while you're trying to get to your destination or when you're coming back from it. It seems like coming back is the worst. I don't know why it is. It always seems like anytime we go on a road trip somewhere out of state, coming back in through Texas just seems like it's like fuck all forever. It's a huge, gigantic state. And, Houston's like 5 hours away, so. But it still has affected us, even though we didn't get direct effects of the actual hurricane here. This kind of stuff still affects where I live. Even Katrina affected us because we got hit with an influx of. Remember when they did that PSYOP thing where it was a total psychological operation. You couldn't call them refugees; you had to call them evacuees and all this bullshit. See, the reason they did that when Katrina happened is because refugee was really more appropriate. It really was, especially when you look at weather weapons and whatnot. And of course, somebody like me who's been tracking chemtrails and watching chemtrails for the past month or so leading up to this hurricane, the chemtrails have been unbelievable in this area and across Texas, and I've seen them. I could just tell something was going on during the eclipse and stuff. There was tons of activity going on with chemtrails and the rest of it during that. And there's no question they knew that this was coming. It's interesting, about a month or so ago, this is before there was any indication of a hurricane or anything. And I used to see this all the time because I actually used to live out in the same area. But a friend of mine I went to high school with posted a picture on his Facebook page that was taken not very far from Rockwall, actually, kind of in actually in an area I used to live at. And I know for a fact there's like a National Guard armory out there, like where they keep all the fucking, all the weapons and vehicles and stuff. And not long before the hurricane, there was lots of pictures taken and posted on Facebook of mass amounts of weapons and vehicles and stuff being transported by rail, by train, coming out of that Army National Guard about a month or so before. I noticed this on Facebook. And then, of course, when they started talking about the hurricane, I said, well, if you've been listening to the show for a long time, you've heard me talk about the disaster economy and how, these weather weapons and whatnot are used to make these naturally occurring storms strong. And then they just use climate change and global warming or what have you as the scapegoat for that. Meanwhile, they've been using these weather weapons, and they've been on I mean, it's documented they've been using this stuff for decades, literally. So from, all the different methods, from silver iodine and some of the other methods they use. I mean, there's not just one way. There's no way to skin a cat in this situation, as the expression goes. There's more than one way to modify and change the weather, and especially when you start having stuff that uses electromagnetic pulse weapons and electromagnetic energy focused on the barium that they spray, which is a radioactive isotope. And if you study weather and you see how weather patterns form, and what does it always have to do with? It always has to do with, what temperature the air is and all this stuff. And that's what those weather weapons, with electromagnetic weapons and barium and all that, that's what it gives you the ability to do, is to hyper intensify naturally occurring weather patterns, and actually steer them. So that make no mistake about it, these are weapons, and these weapons have been unleashed on humanity for many, many years. And anybody affected by these weapons are, in fact, if you are fleeing an area because there is warfare going on, you're a refugee. And that was the whole thing. Well, we shouldn't call them refugees because we should call them evacuees. No, because refugee is more accurate. Because that's what happened during Katrina. It was a weather weapon that was used. It was a testing of that technology to use it again in even bigger, more fiercer situations. And so we have another case of that here, without question, going on in my home state here of Texas. And it's incredible to see this stuff play out that way. But I'm fine. I'm not affected by it. I live in Dallas. A lot of people are like, I don't know. They just don't know how big a state this is. But the general rule is, though, I mean, honestly, don't live on the fucking coast. I've said that many times here on the show. If you live on the coast, move away from the coast. That's just a word of warning. They're going to continue to use this stuff, and continue to use it and engineer this stuff, because, again, there's so many angles to look at this, and don't, maybe this wasn't even us using this on ourselves. I mean, this could be some other country, Russia. Russia was ahead of the game even farther than us for many decades as far as weather manipulation, weather control, and all that stuff goes. Russia was way, way far ahead of us. And, these type of weapons have been put on the table many years ago by countries and whatnot to be used. And in fact, many believe that the famous drought that hit America in the 1980s that wiped out many crops was actually the results of Russian weather modification operations on the U.S. as far back as the early 1980s. And that's just what we know about. Who knows how long it's been going on before that? And so certainly, if these weapons were being used then, they're being used now, and they're being used in much bigger and more political affecting ways than they used to. But even before there was any such a thing as HARP or anything, I mean, Russia had the first. I've talked about this many times, but Russia had the very first HARP before where there was the High Active Auroral Research Project. Right directly, incidentally enough, if you look it up on the map, it's just directly diagonal line from east to west, directly across from Gakona, Alaska, across to Russia, where the Sura, S-U-R-A, the Sura ionospheric heating system sits to this day. But this was HARP before HARP, and absolutely it's come out from, KGB documents and stuff that have come out since the fall of the Soviet Union and whatnot have shown that, yes, indeed, they were using these ionospheric heaters specifically for weather weapons, and that they did deploy these weapons during the Cold War. So, look at it's. I started looking at this even before the fucking hurricane came. I knew what was happening. I knew what they were about to do, and I know why. Because, again, when you look at all the geopolitical stuff that's going on, especially when you look in terms of all the Russian stuff and China and all the rest of it, I mean, you got to look at which countries would have a political interest in doing this. But really, it's about, more than anything, affecting the oil refineries and stuff going on there, because they've needed an excuse to jack gas prices up back again, man. They were living the fucking high life there for a long time with their $4 and $5. They just made $5, $6, $7 a gallon gas the norm for a while. Remember that? And now that they've got Republicans in office again, and Rex Tillerson is that just still makes me laugh. That Rex Tillerson would have any political position, knowing that any political position that guy could have is automatically compromised before he even holds one day of office because of his activities in the business world. So absolutely, these guys have a motive and a benefit to this. Then they just give all their, think about it. Houston's is the home of Halliburton. Halliburton World Headquarters is in fucking Houston. Brown and Root, which used to be Kellogg Brown and Root, which was, of course, involved with, Lyndon Baines Johnson and the no bid contracts he gave during Vietnam that they weren't going to get if Kennedy had lived and ended the war. And so, these companies oftentimes always get these contracts anyway. Many of these companies that happen to be these big, we're talking about big elite companies, Halliburton, Brown and Root. We're talking about companies that are direct outsourcers to the CIA and the Pentagon, work directly with the military. And so these guys there's billions of dollars and give these people contracts, and that's what they want. So considering that these companies that would want these contracts anyway are already based in Houston, and this happens in Houston, well, you can already see where the favorability factor is going to lean, right? And that's what this is about. This is big money. And, also what bothers me too is all these people, now it's already today, all these famous people, donate, the Kardashians and fucking all these rappers, people donating hundreds of thousands of dollars. The Kardashians donated $500,000. And, very little of that stuff is actually ever going to go to helping any of the people that lost everything, and in some cases lost everything, and even they had insurance, and they're still not going to, there's a lot of people that lost everything, even if they had insurance, they're not going to get shit. That's the whole, that's one of the whole scams of insurance, and it's, God, what a scam the whole insurance industry is the biggest scam ever. Because when you really need it, there, you could spend your whole life paying your fucking insurance, but then when you really need it in a situation like this, they're not there. And many of these, the Red Cross and all these, do not give money to any of those fucking groups, man. I mean, there was so much money after 9/11 that hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe even $1 billion. I mean, just hundreds, and none of it all just basically disappears. It goes into a black hole. And these people, you got to trace the money back. These people that control the disaster economy also control things like the Red Cross and these different organizations. I mean, the best thing that people can do, J.J. Watt, football player, raising all this money. I mean, he lives in Houston. He's raising all this money, but you should be going in and finding these people and handing them cash or cutting them checks instead of having all this stuff, donate to this foundation or donate to Red Cross. We're going to use this for victims. Like, no, that's horse shit, man. They do this every time, and this is part of the disaster economy. This is how they capitalize on people. And meanwhile, people just think that nothing bad is going, nothing's wrong because they're not hearing about it on the news. And meanwhile, there's, people displaced, people who, I can't imagine. I mean, if that happened to something like me, I mean, somebody like me who's independent, an independent filmmaker and a talk show host, without, I mean, I'd be fucked. So, that's where I think the focus, I mean, just, if you don't live in Texas and you don't have the ability to actually come to Texas and like help out with the effort, it's going to get handled. But I mean, this horse shit, I'm just sick of seeing this stuff where people are donating to these millions of dollars to these faceless organizations, and still people are going to be homeless after this. Still, I mean, we're already getting influxes of people here in Dallas, and Dallas has already become an overrun city. It's way overpopulated. Austin's way overpopulated. I mean, the other cities here in Texas just can't. We can't absorb. Already, we're overpopulated. I mean, because of the all the illegal immigration and the Mexicans and all that stuff here. But now with this, it's going to cause the overpopulations of cities like Austin and Dallas to become even worse, and it's already bad. Not enough affordable housing. Not enough. It's just not enough everything. And this is only going to make it worse. So, and these are the things that never get attention. They're happy to talk about and show victims and talk about, displaced pets and all this stuff, but they don't talk about the other cities that, like Austin and Dallas and whatnot, and other cities that suffer as well when stuff like this happens, because, the people are displaced and they go to wherever the closest place is and they stay there, and oftentimes they don't ever go back. There are a lot of people who were displaced in Katrina that never went back to New Orleans. There's going to be a lot of people displaced in South Texas and Houston. They're never going to go back and live there ever again. And that's the whole thing with this. So just, if I could encourage people, if you're going to do something one-on-one. Don't fall. There's so many. Every time there's anything like this, from 9/11 to Katrina, there's always so many scams and fake things. These, again, this is the disaster economy as I've described it many, many times. And stuff like this does bump up the economy. Think about the manufacturing costs, all the costs for manufacturing and rebuilding costs. And you look at who owns that, and who owns the companies that make all these products, and who owns the companies that make all these machines and the fabricators and the stuff that make. I mean, every time you trace it back, it's these elite, top, big companies. These guys are going to make it. This is a fucking boon for them. I mean, these guys could afford. This is what's disgusting about it. These guys could afford to give every single person, displaced in this thing, a new place to live, and they still make sick amounts of money. I mean, that's why it's just disgusting. So that's the thing I see here. I'm just thankful I didn't grow up or live. I know lots of people live in Houston. I have lots of listeners that live in Houston. I hope all of our listeners and everybody out there that's affected by this is okay. But with something like this, especially when you've got, I mean, clearly if you watch this thing, I know many of you did, if you were tracking this thing as it was happening, clearly you could see, I mean, they were hitting this thing. You could go and watch you could just see the heart meter just going through the roof. You know, they're hitting this motherfucker with electromagnetic pulse, and they were amplifying the thing just like they took Katrina and steered it up around the fucking, you know, eastern coast and brought it back around Florida and slammed it up into New Orleans. I mean, they were amplified. I think they've already said this is like a record rainfall of all time, the most rain ever in the history of ever. Since the fucking, you know, Noah flood or whatever, literally. I mean, it's pure insanity. Texas is big though. There's lots of land. I've never understood why we don't have more cities than we do, more bigger cities. I don't understand why we just keep, you know, taking the 3 or 4 big cities we have already, and you know, San Antonio, Austin, Dallas, Houston. Well, we're kind of 2 cities here, Dallas, Fort Worth, but let's just start making some other cities, especially here in Texas, man. We got the room. We've got the room. We got the room to keep expanding westward, and you could put 100 more big cities in the state of Texas you want. There's that much fucking room. It's huge, man. Let's start building some more cities instead of overrunning the already existing cities and making life more miserable for people than it already is in these places. I just don't get it. We have the resources. You can't tell me we don't have the resources. But again, this is about the destruction, the decimation of humanity, and all of these things fall under that same guise and category. It doesn't matter what topic it is you're talking about. Any restriction of knowledge or any of this stuff you want to talk about, it's all about the same agenda. Scientology anti-drug program fabricated court orders suggest attempt to silence critics. Someone appears to be trying to scrub warnings about the church's controversial Narconon program from the internet, nearly a decade after Scientology prompted a high-profile internet protest movement sparked when the church attempted to remove a damaging YouTube video of member Tom Cruise speaking about the religion. Comes the discovery of a new covert campaign to subvert online criticism of the organization's social work. A series of forged court orders were submitted to Google in 2016 in an attempt to convince the search giant to expunge links to written objections to Scientology's controversial anti-drug program, Narconon. Collectively, the material seeks to mend the standing of unbranded Narconon facilities in Michigan and their owner, a prominent Scientologist named Per Wickstrom, whose reputations have been battered by statements on a number of dedicated websites and message boards critical of the church and the program, including whyweprotest.net and exscn.net, as well as the General Consumer Watchdog Service ripoffreport.com. 4 fabricated orders dated May and August 2016, ostensibly in Hamilton County, Ohio, Fulton County, Georgia, and Philadelphia. It's unclear who's responsible for forging the orders. However, another we reviewed sham from Hamilton County documents involving a request to remove links from search engines, a process known as de-indexing. THR obtained business contract connected to the other filing, indicating that an entity called Web Savvy had charged a fee of $3,750 for the successful elimination of each negative link. Web Savvy and a related company, ReputationMasters.com, are based in Torrance, just south of Los Angeles, and both are run by a marketing consultant named John Rooney, who describes himself on LinkedIn as an expert in, quote, removing negative content from the web and promoting clients' positive image, citing ripoffreport.com at the top of a list of sites he focuses on. Corresponding by email, Rooney denied that his firm had any connection to Narconon. When pressed to explain the documentation, he stopped responding to emails and phone calls. So, essentially what we're talking about here is scrubbing stuff from the internet. And Narconon, of course, has come up. That comes up and will be mentioned in Spellcasters Volume 2, by the way. But I mean, there's no question about it. A lot of people deny this. I've seen it myself. It happens. Stuff gets scrubbed from the internet, data, information. There's stuff that I found that, data and information and stuff that had been on the internet for years, man. And, you go back and you try to find it again, and it's gone. It's been scrubbed. I remember back in, when I first started my show, almost 10 years ago now. This was when you had all the Ron Paul hysteria and everybody trying to get Ron Paul elected. And right around that time that's when I first found out about the Council for National Policy. And so after I had found so many connections already to people who were Council for National Policy members that had stuff to do with Ron Paul and were connected to him. And so I was like, well, he's got to be. And you look at his affiliations and looked at who who his peers are. It was pretty, in association with Alex Jones and stuff too. It was pretty easy to see that he possibly could be a member of the Council for National Policy. So I started searching high and low, and sure enough, I found, I guess it was an old member list or something that was on a website that somebody had found from an old membership list that got released, and sure enough, it had his name on it. And, I guess, well, back then I wasn't as savvy as I am now as far as, like, I just assumed, I didn't really know much about scrubbing stuff back then. That may have been my first encounter with that. And I was using PCs and stuff back then. And I don't, no, they did it later, but back then you had to kind of have, a program to do screen. It wasn't easy to do screenshots and screen captures as it is now, or to just have, a phone with a camera on it. It's easy to take a picture of, and be good quality. I mean, it wasn't like that then. So I found this, and that was enough confirmation for me that he was connected to the Council for National Policy. But after a couple of months, when his campaign started going on, and I started talking about that stuff more and more, and then people started picking up on it, and it was getting mentioned in the mainstream media, that completely scrubbed and was gone from the internet, and I've never been able to find another trace of it ever again. So absolutely it happens. And again, if you've seen Spellcasters Volume 1 or 1.5, if you haven't seen those yet, I advise you go hit the download shop tonight and get yourself some downloads and watch those movies. But that's the whole thing with all of this. And that's the point I make in Spellcasters Volume 1. That, the CMP, Scientology, they're all CIA connected. So the fact that you would see these people associating with folks like Alex Jones and Ron Paul and the rest of it makes sense once you understand this being all a part of this continued mind war and psychological operation in order to, by their own admission, I mean, the whole, if you read the Aquino mind war document stuff, I mean, which it really describes the whole Alex Jones operation to a T. And it's all about making the American people believe, or a certain subsection of the population. They tried this, as I've talked about previously, they tried this once before back in the year 2000, into 99, 2000, Y2K. They tried it with the whole, I guess, project. I can't remember if it's project or operation. I sometimes say project, but I think it might be Operation Megiddo. As in the Bible, Megiddo. And all that's been declassified. You can go look up those documents. But it was all about creating a panic of a new world order. This is their terminology in the declassified government documents, folks. It says folks who are Christian right-wing gun owners and people who believe in a new world order conspiracy to take over and form one world government. We want to use, they didn't say COINTELPRO type of activities so that we can get these people to do something violent as a pretext of gun control to be able to go in and start seizing people's weapons and rounding people up. And you bet your bottom dollar, your boy was doing his goddamnedest as part of that fucking operation on Y2K. Go and listen to it if you never heard it. It's epic. And it's where he's, Russian nukes are in the air, folks. I mean, he was basically spouting it was the end of the world. Even Bill Cooper called him out on that shit. But exactly what was going on then, what they tried to do then is it's a continuation of that now. And that's what it's all about. They have to find a way to associate people who are truth seekers with domestic terrorism and neo-Nazism and the rest of it, because that's what a lot of these fucking operators and stuff, man, who come around the past few years. You see these guys who started out kind of talking about stuff kind of like what I talk about, and then right before Trump got elected, they just like it was a fucking cue card, just on cue, not one or two, multiple. You saw they turn around, all of a sudden they're white nationalist. All of a sudden, when they talked about, the phony left-right paradigm, all of a sudden now they're right-wing. None of that stuff was on accident. This wasn't people just turning overnight. These are pre-planted, initiated agents who were infiltrated from the get-go, who were just waiting for their marching orders to turncoat for the next level of the operation. And that's why when I first started exposing this stuff and exposing these connections to these white supremacist organizations and neo-Nazi organizations, to the Council for National Policy and, Truth Movement stuff, as I've talked about, man, that people were getting real nervous, and I just could never figure out why. That's when I started figuring, because there's been a couple of times I had people say to me that I, was on to something more than I knew what I was really on to with this stuff. And yeah, I've definitely found that to be true. Did you guys hear that they, somebody sent the Jones fucking Peter Patriot penis popper pills to they sent them to a lab and had them analyzed, and there's just a bunch of nothing that nothing that can really hurt you or anything, which I wouldn't think he would be doing anything like that. He would have already been caught, but nothing that really helps either. Pretty fascinating. I mean, I should be in this racket. I should have started making my own creams and dick pills, and I mean, this guy's running a fucking racket over here, because when you read what's in this stuff, it's nothing. He's selling fucking iodine for like 4 times. I mean, it's just retarded. But again, all this stuff, you gotta look at all this stuff as a form of money laundering as well. I mean, that's what all these criminal operations and these CIA fronts, all these organizations do. They have fake products. This is how they keep the money for the operations that come in from other operations, drug running, whatever it may be. I can remember back, this is probably 9-10 years ago. I think it was right around the time when I first went on air. There was a big blow up with Alex Jones and John Statmiller, who runs that RBN, which I was on for a short period of time in 2007. And him and Statmiller and Jones had some history, went way back. They're both fucking, got spook bait, fed bait written all over them. And there was this, I can't remember what this whole thing was. It was this big blow up on people doing shows on one network and as well as doing it on another at the same time or something. But hey, I remember John Statmiller said on air, I'll never forget this. He said on air that Alex Jones is the biggest drug dealer in Austin, and he deals weed and coke and he's the biggest drug dealer in Austin. And he said this on air on a show, which, of course, Alex Jones was listening to. I don't remember, there was something they knew he was listening to it or something. But anyway, I just never understood it. He didn't get sued for that. I would think if you called somebody that, and it wasn't true, it always boggled my mind. I didn't think, I kind of forgot about it for a long time. And I was going back through some of the old stuff and thinking about, the past 10 years of doing radio. I remembered that and just remembered, when you study some of these other cases, I was talking about the Tupac stuff last night. When you study cases like that, and you study all these other things, and you see how these, operations work, man, and you see the connections, especially when you start seeing the CIA stuff, and the Khashoggi, Adnan Khashoggi fucking info, and his connections to the CIA, and him having all these various, 5 million different front companies, or CIA front companies for money laundering that all have the name Genesis in them, like as in Genesis Communications Radio Network. I mean, that's the whole thing, man. The rabbit hole is, I personally, at this point, after 10 years of being on air, I have to say, it's my professional opinion that the rabbit hole is deeper than the majority of people out there will ever care to know about. It really is. And so that's why I want to keep going as deeper down as I can and bringing it out, because it's people aren't ready for it, man. People are just not ready for how deep down it goes. And if they were ready for it, you'd see a lot more people. There'd be much larger mass awakening going on right now than there is. Somebody sent me this. I had already seen it, but thanks for sending it to me anyway. Yeah, I've actually had this sitting up here on my news stack for a few weeks. I debated whether or not I was even going to talk about this or not, because really I'll mention it just because a listener sent me this article, but I'd already seen this, by the way. I just wasn't going to talk about it because it's old news. People send you stuff all the time. They're like, oh, look at this. I'm like, yeah, so? Like I'm supposed to be freaked out by it or shocked by this news. I'm just looking at it. I'm like, yeah, so what? It's old news. That's way fucking old news. Scientists remotely hacked a brain controlling body movements. Yeah. Next. Fucking, the Nazis had that fucking technology back in the early 40s, right? Next. I mean, that just doesn't blow my hair back at all. They were, if you haven't seen Spellcasters, and a lot of people still out there that listen to the show and stuff haven't seen my films, you just don't even know what you're missing out on if you haven't seen. At least, start with like Lost Roots of Ancient America or something and go back and watch the other ones. But, Lost Roots of Ancient America 1 and 2, and then Spellcasters and Spellcasters 1.5, you should definitely, those are essential viewing as far as my work is concerned. You can go back and watch the first 3 movies later or something, or get the box set when it comes out. But, yeah, I mean, the Nazis were using, that's what the whole thing with Spellcasters and all that's about. The Nazis were using black magic and psychedelic drugs like LSD to create robotically controlled, completely robotically controlled soldiers. And then we brought all those scientists and all that data over here during Project Paperclip. And that formed the foundation of what eventually became, after it had a bunch of other names and had a bunch of other different purposes, what eventually became MK Ultra, and what eventually spawned Scientology itself. And I even have L. Ron Hubbard's own son in the film, where it's me reading from an interview that he did, where he talks about that explicitly, that the black magic that his father conducted and used, that's essential part of Scientology, absolutely goes back, and the Nazis were doing it. He even admits that it went back to them. So, I mean, but I've talked about this before. They always do this. They roll out stuff. For the past 10 years, they've been rolling out stories about the railgun. Oh, the railgun's coming. The railgun, the electromagnetic weapon, the fabled railgun. They've had those railguns for fucking 25 plus years. John Q. Public on the fucking street corner, and Sally Soccer Mom may not know about it, but it doesn't change the fact that they've had these weapons for years. But they do that constantly because they keep the state of knowledge of the people at one level, while the state of knowledge of the elite, the state of knowledge of the powers that be, the priests, the people in power, government. Their level of knowledge is at a completely different level, and it's been this way going back to the first post-flood civilizations that popped up, going back to Sumeria, Akkadian, Babylon. All of it, this has been going on since then, because in those days the priests were the government, and there's always been a hierarchy of the powers that be, that hold sway over the people, by having a different level of knowledge and understanding than the masses, than the sheep, the profane, whatever the fucking name they use this week to call us. So you have to understand that anytime you are if you read a news article, I don't care what it is, like this one, the world's first album composed and produced by an AI has been unveiled. So an AI computer, to them, according to them, just created it and composed a whole album by itself. That probably happened 25 years ago. Anything you're just hearing about now is old news to the people that sit at a different level of knowledge than the rest of us. And the goal, of course, at least for me, for my constant research, and at least what I'm trying to bring to my audience, is at least an attempt. At least an attempt. Nobody else is out there, folks, is even at least making the attempt. All I want to do is at least make the attempt for us to be able to get closer and close that gap between the knowledge of the everyday person and the knowledge of the people in power. Now, some people, granted, don't need that information. I get that. On some level, you don't want everybody to have it, but there should at least be an opportunity for people to have a greater understanding of this if they want it. That's my goal. The playing field is not level. People always want to talk about solutions. They want to talk about what we can do to defeat these people or bring about the end of it. And the fact of the matter is, you can never come up with a solution until there is at least a more level playing field as far as the level and the access of knowledge that we have versus what they have. And since all of again, the secret societies were originally set up for this. That was the whole purpose originally for secret societies in the first place. They, like anything and everything else, they got corrupted through time and became looked at more as symbols of evil or whatever than symbols of pushing forward and keeping mankind going forward and evolving, which is what they were originally supposed to do. And of course, not everybody, they knew even then, not every person, we see it now, I see it with this type of stuff. You can go on YouTube or anywhere on the internet and see it in about 2.5 seconds, people who were just not meant to have deeper levels of information. I get it took me a while to get that, but I get it. Once you start understanding and researching this stuff, you get why there was such a moratorium put on sacred knowledge and secret knowledge, and how it was only supposed to be in the hands of certain people, and how you had to go through different tests and initiations to get to those deeper levels of understanding and prove that you understood this information both on a material level and a spiritual level simultaneously before you could get to the next levels. And I see that now. It's one of the, anything good always has bad byproducts, Doesn't matter what it is. Everybody knows that. It's the, the alpha and the omega and the, the yin and the yang of it all. But I've definitely seen, I've seen a lot in my time. I've seen a lot in the 10 years I've been doing this radio thing and doing the show, making films, I tell you. But, there are just some people out there who who shouldn't have, it fucks them up. I've made the analogy many times, just like there's people like that with drugs and alcohol, there are people who can, have a good time and drink and drink all night, never really get fucked up, never do anything stupid or crazy, or, people who can smoke weed and, they never do anything stupid or do hallucinogens or whatever. and do tons of them. I'm not talking about just doing a little bit. I'm talking about people, there are people who just do tons of them, never have a problem, you know, and never have any kind of, not affect their life in any negative way. But then you got people who, you know, who've gone through whatever in their life. Everybody goes through something. Everybody's got a story, and you know, maybe they're not all, maybe they're not really all kind of all there to begin with. And I've seen them many times. And you give them a little bit of, just a little bit, take one drink, a shot or something, and they go from normal, you know, okay, to the fucking Tasmanian fucking devil in 2.5 seconds, and just become. I mean, I've literally seen people become possessed. I've seen it where they're almost, it seems like they're possessed, where they just become, where you're talking to somebody, you're talking to like a demon spirit or something. You're not even talking to the real person. That's why they call alcohol, you know, the old name is what they call it, spirits. Because that, you know, that's goes back to that idea that when you're inebriated on alcohol, the layer between your spirit, soul, and the world and whatnot is thinner. So, these different demons and entities can jump inside of you while you're under the influence of alcohol and whatnot. So that's why a lot of the old walkways and doors, you'll see them, they'll have rounded walkways and doors. They won't have square walkways. That's because supposedly these little spirits can't, they like to sit on entryways and whatnot, in and outs of places. And if they're square, they can sit on the corners of them and jump inside you. This is, you know, the folklore or whatever. So you'll start to notice this in architecture, certain places, in Masonic lodges and old houses and stuff. You'll see these, you know, rounded entrances, especially on, you know, at bars and whatnot. Look at old pubs and always just pay attention to their entryways and the shapes of them and whatnot. It's very fascinating to look at. But this type of you know, conspiratorial information or whatnot, it can have that same effect on people. I've seen it have that same effect on people, and it is identical to what I just described as, you know, people who were exposed to drugs and alcohol who were already kind of not there anyway, but it's like throwing gasoline on fire. Again, I've seen the same thing with this type of research where people, you know, I can't tell you how many times I've got emails from people who, you know, just now found out about this type of stuff, and for whatever reason, you see, people usually find me after they've been into this stuff for a while, but occasionally it happens that I happen to be the first person that they've seen. So they start hearing me talk before kind of starting at some of the lower level base understanding stuff, and it just sets them on fire. I need to know everything you know about everything, and I need you to know it right now. And I'm laughing, going, it's impossible, because you really have to. This is not something that you can just, it's not like a school class where you can go, okay, I'm going to dip my toe in it and learn a little about this, and then, okay, no. You're never going to have, because, you know, it's a constantly changing. I don't believe 100% the same things I believed 4 or 5 years ago, 10 years ago for sure, no. My whole understanding and belief of all this stuff has changed dramatically since I've been doing this. Over the past 10 years, it's changed dramatically. Absolutely. There are a lot of things that I used to think were, you know, bad or evil or not good, and this, that, and the other, that I've learned now were exaggerated and overblown and fear-mongered. And then there are other things that I thought were, you know, innocent and not bad at all, that have turned out to be, you know, more of the same, more of the evil, more of the mind control, more of the, you know, all of it. So when it comes to understanding this stuff, there is no static state of mind. It's not something that you can just, I see people do it, but I feel sorry for those people, because they just look like dinosaurs as far as I'm concerned. I see people, you know, I'm not going to name names, but I see people have been doing this as long as I have, or maybe a little shorter than I have, or a little longer than I have. But people out there, they're still going today. Won't name names. And, you can listen to one of their shows after not listening to them for 10 years, and there's no progression. You know, there's no new place, that they're still rehashing and regurgitating the same stuff they were doing 10, 12, 13, 14 years ago. So And that, again, that comes from people who just, because it's easy to do. I felt that. I mean, I was that way before I started my radio show, because at that point I've been researching this stuff for so long, read so many books, and had listened to radio shows and tried to find somebody talking about the stuff I knew about, and just never did. So that was like, man, I need a radio show. I think I need this is. I could be talking about stuff nobody knows about, right? But as I've talked about, I mean, it doesn't last very long, because you start, once you keep researching, keep realizing that, wait a minute, I mean, you get to that point, especially once you start falling down the rabbit hole and finding out about the CMP stuff and the connections, how all this conspiracy stuff has been controlled and connected to Scientology for 50, 60 years, like I talk about in Spellcasters. I mean, then you have to understand that a lot of the stuff that you initially learned, stuff about like the Illuminati or whatever, New World Order, while a lot of that stuff is true, you kind of have to relearn it again, because some of the sources which you originally learned this stuff from are questionable. And so their information should be questionable. So, I mean, especially with a subject like the Illuminati, nobody ever talks about the Los Alumbrados Society, which was actually really where the Illuminati started, way before the Wise Top thing or any of that. It existed before then, and goes back even further, as I've talked about, back to the even the Pythagoras mystery schools, Egyptian mystery schools, Babylonian mystery schools, and even prior to that, the Brotherhood of the Snake and the Serpent. But again, those original secret societies were created so that this sacred knowledge that, could be, they knew even then the power of this information and this secret knowledge. They knew that in the hands of the wrong people, instead of being used for the ultimate expression of mankind as a species and for its, the ultimate brotherhood, it could just as easily be used for the ultimate evil and the ultimate enslavement of mankind. And so the original secret societies were, in fact, created to avoid that, so that this information wouldn't just remain in the hands of, a priest class or a particular group of individuals who are at that time governing over a land, or, being dictators or whatever, to keep, as I was saying earlier, keep the playing field more level. They didn't expect to have every citizen and every person to have this information, but it was set up so that in the future, when mankind was ready, the tools for its own full expression would be waiting. But instead, as the years went by, people understood the power of this, and then combining that with magic and the magical incantations, and the ability to manipulate matter, possibly even space-time, through the use of language and phrases. I mean, it goes back to the ancient Kabbalism, the spoken word and all of that, the ability to manipulate physical matter by using these different incantations and the creation of anything out of thin air by using, this kind of stuff is exactly the type of knowledge, and just a small amount of all of the vast knowledge that's being hidden from mankind in order to keep us enslaved, in order to keep us from being powerful, and to keep us in a state of arrested development that allows us to be ruled over by governments, by religion, and by the monetary enslavement system. So leveling the playing field and getting ourselves back up to a level where we can compete has got to be the ultimate goal. And that's why I continue to dig and expose all the things. There's so much that's never been exposed, and so many people out there are being lied to and taken advantage of by all these hucksters and, people on YouTube, and all these motherfuckers claiming that they're for the truth. They make me look bad. Because, I've been fighting this fight for so long, and because there are all these hucksters and new jacks and liars and people, people who are just repeating and parroting shit they heard somebody else say instead of doing hard research on their own and having their own topics and their own opinions. They're just taking opinions they heard somebody else say and repeating that, and that becomes their own opinion. That's not furthering the truth. That's not expanding the palette of knowledge to put ourselves on an equal playing field. That's just parroting what they allow you to know. We got to get beyond that. I don't have all the answers to how we get there, but I know for a fact that from all the stuff I've done from the beginning of making my films, with the CMP stuff, the Lost Secret stuff, the Rockwall stuff, I mean, I've seen changes in the scientific community. I've seen them have to admit stuff is older than it was, than they ever admitted before, from the time of the release of Lost Secrets of Ancient America Volume 1 in 2013. I mean, I've seen it. My listeners and out there have seen it. There are people who say, oh my gosh, look at this. They sent me, articles. Look at this. They're pushing the dates on this stuff back further and further because, I mean, when I presented from the data from the Rockwall, at 340,000 years, that's smoking all of the stuff. Now they're just getting to the point where they're, oh, look at this. We found some stuff that's 14,000 years old. That's the oldest we've known about. And then they come out with articles like this where they say humans have been, basically chopping down rainforests and stuff for 45,000 years. Well, wait a minute. According to you, we've only been here how long? 8,000, 9,000, 10,000? But then these scientific articles come out and talk about humans chopping down rainforests 45,000 years ago. I mean, they contradict themselves at every turn. But I just want to get all this stuff out. I just want to keep releasing movies after movie after movie, and I just want to be able to create. That's always been my goal. I want to create, the Alexandrian library of knowledge and information. I mean, like you had that, in Egypt, that was a thing. Well, I want to create that for the truth, I want to have a library eventually, a public resource, something that has all this. And that's what I'm trying to do with my films, in my radio show and all this, and the audiobooks. That's why we're doing these box sets and stuff. You should definitely go and check out the download shop and get yourself, before the end of next month, get a download of the 10-year anniversary audiobook box set that we just put out. Over 91 hours of audio, 15 audiobooks that are all, for the first time, edited down into single files. If you've gotten any of the older ones, you'll know that the MP3s had to be chopped up into multiple files, and that makes it kind of a pain in the ass when you're trying to listen to them, especially if you put them on your phone or your device or whatever. These, you can just drop one file, boom, right into your device, and you can rewind it or go back and pause it, whatever. But even the ones that are like 10, 11 hours long, one file, one MP3 audio file. That's the best thing about this new collection, is the fact that it's all the complete audiobooks from the show. So, definitely go and get yourself one of those. And if you haven't seen Lost Secrets of Ancient America Volume 1 or 2, or Spellcasters 1 or 1.5, definitely check out the download shop. You can find links to that here on the YouTube video in the comments and in the more info section, as well as the links to our fundraisers for this month. This is our fundraising week. This is the week we have to raise the minimum amount we need to cover our operating costs for the month. We've got links. We'll have links to that here in the YouTube video for you, in the comment section, and in the read more information. We've got to reach 100% of our operating cost goal by 3 p.m. on Friday. And everybody who contributes $100 will get their name or name of their choice in the special thanks credits of Spellcasters Volume 2. 3 downloads from the download shop, and a free download of the Spellcasters Volume 2 when it comes out. So, and of course, as we usually do, the person who contributes the highest amount, usually, anywhere from 400 to 600. We'll see what the largest amount is this month. But whoever contributes the largest amount will get a nice prize. We'll have everybody in the running that contributes $100 or more will be in the running for a big grand prize as well. And if you want to contribute to the 10-year anniversary fundraiser, we're going to be really pushing this. We've got to reach our goal. Our goal is to reach 100% of our 10-year anniversary fundraiser goal too by the actual 10-year anniversary of the show, which is like September 26th. So we'll be talking about that more as we get into next month. But really, the immediate goal right now is just get our operating costs covered so we can keep, we got to keep the lights on. We got to keep our studio. We got to keep everything here. I understand there's less shows when I'm working on a film, but we'll be back to having a lot more shows once the movie's out and once the movie's done. But again, this is the most critical time. We're moving into our 10 years here. We've got so much big stuff and big happenings and things on the horizon, stuff I haven't even talked about yet that we're going to be doing. So we can't fail now. So please just go and this week, make it your mission as it is mine. This is what I'm asking of all of our independent lone wolf badasses out there. And you can be an independent lone wolf badass too if you contribute to our work. Because as I've said, I am a one-man operation. All these films, I do everything from the writing, the voiceovers. I compose and perform all the music, everything, every element of these films. I'm a one-man operation. But nothing can survive in a vacuum. And to quote Rush, and I couldn't do any of this without all the badass lone wolf motherfuckers out there who believe in the cause. And again, even being a one-man operation, when you contribute in and help out this cause, you become a part of that. So when I say support our work, that's what I'm talking about, because it's your work too when you contribute and help us keep it going. And we just need more of it right now. So please hit up our fundraisers. Add us on Facebook, Global Reality Radio Network Facebook, and the Josh Reeves Filmmaker Talk Show Host Explorer page. Go and add us now and support our work. We'll see you next time, folks. Take care.